Hey, it's Jared, and I have a really neat camera to show you today. It is the LYTRO ILLUM. This camera is a light field camera. It is different than most cameras that you're familiar with, where typically your camera focuses on a given position and takes that picture, and wherever that focal point is, the camera is, everything is focused, everything is sharp in that area. However, with this camera, it takes a photo, and just because of the way that it captures light, it is able to refocus on a larger plane. That is what was originally really intriguing to me. I thought, that would be interesting to be able to take a photo and then refocus it, and then pull out whatever focal point you wanted. And then I realized that there was the ability to turn that into an animation and actually export that as a video. And that's where it really got cool for me, because in film, you have the ability, like when you're shooting video, to adjust focus and have this, like, pull your focus as it moves from one subject to another or from one plane to the next. However, with this camera, you're able just to shoot that photo and then set that animation however you want. And so that was initially the thing that I thought was really cool. So this camera is a bit different than what you're used to. Not only does it look different and feel different, but everything about this camera is different. From the way that you charge it or connect it using a USB 3 connector, which it comes included, but this is a little bit different. Most cameras have a USB connector, but this actually has USB 3, so it requires a much larger connector, which, it's neat because you could still charge the camera from this port, but it meant I had to bring extra cables with me because I needed to make sure I had one in my car to charge this camera, because I only had one battery that came with the camera. And the battery, you get pretty decent lifespan out of the battery, but you're not going to be able to go and shoot a full day on the battery. And this camera isn't typically the type of camera that you would go and shoot all day with. You'd plan in your head, what's a neat photo that I could take, and you'd go and take it. This camera requires a bit more planning than what we're able to do with a standard camera. Just kind of take a camera and just go run and gun and take a bunch of pictures. You have to kind of think about your photo a little bit more with this. So it does have a large articulating screen, which is really neat because it allows you to hold the camera at different angles, down low, and pop the screen up so that you can see. It has the shutter right here. It has the LYTRO button right here, which actually allows you to see in a couple of different ways, and kind of predict how your photo is going to look. So typically when you're taking pictures with this, and it's really hard to show this, it's one of these things that you have to get your hands on a camera and you have to practice. But what you're wanting to set up is what your foreground and what your background objects are going to be. So in this small animation that I'm showing you right here, I had this little plant in my living room that I focused on in my foreground, and my son, who was sitting across the room on the couch watching a TV show, was in the background. And so using the focal ring here, because you have a zoom ring and you have a focal ring, I was able to set my focus, my foreground and my background focus, so that I was able to get a really neat animation that can go from one end of the focal range to the other. And I think it turned out to be a pretty cool photo. Now, what initially intrigued me about this camera was some of the photos that I was seeing other people capture. Mostly it was LYTRO video that they'd put out of people capturing. But I thought, man, what an interesting concept. So you also have AF lock and exposure lock on the back of the camera. You have a function button that allows you to go into some settings and then also look at a photo after you've taken it. What's neat is that the touchscreen on the back of the camera actually works really well. And after you take a photo, you're able to tap in the photo and kind of see how it turned out. So that way you can get a preview as to whether or not that photo worked out, or you're going to have to give it another try. Recently, when I picked up this camera, I hadn't connected it or tried to change the firmware. I just went out and started shooting with it. However, I thought, well, let's see if there's a firmware update. I got a firmware update and installed it on the camera, and things changed. It must have been a pretty good software jump. I didn't look to see what the initial version of the software was, but after making the firmware upgrade, it was a pretty substantial jump in the user interface, and it actually required me kind of learning a little bit about the camera over again. So I recommend, if you pick up this camera, make sure that you have the most up-to-date firmware on the camera. That way you're learning it the way that they intend you to learn it, with the most available, currently available settings. So when I go into function, I can see any of my photos that I've taken, and I can use this little wheel here to kind of scroll through my photos. Because of the nature of these photos, they're large. I've had photos be about 50 megabytes on up to closer to 100 megabytes for one file. So depending on the speed of the SD card that you have in your camera, it may take a moment for these photos to load and for them to be ready for you to view. So just like any other camera, if you don't focus correctly, you're going to end up having a photo that this camera isn't even giving you a focal area, like a focused area. For example, I'm showing you one right now where I messed up the focus, and my two kids in the background were completely out of focus. Even, you know, I set the depth that the camera was to be focused too shallow and too close to me, and so everything was just out of focus, and it didn't end up working out at all. However, I was able to get some really cool shots with this camera, and because of that, I think it's just really neat. Now, when this camera initially launched almost a year ago, or around a year ago, it was pretty expensive. It was around $1,500, might be a little bit more than that. However, the camera has been on sale lately, and the price has been down substantially. And that's what made it really attractive to me, was that the price had came down quite a bit. It allowed me to kind of get a taste for this camera. I'll be honest, when it first came out, the little kaleidoscope-looking version, I was a little confused. I thought, I don't know if I may be a little worried about spending money like that on a new product. However, with the price that this camera came down to, I felt really comfortable with giving it a try, and here it is. So it does also have a 30 to 250 millimeter zoom inside of it, and the zoom feels really digital to me. Even though when you do zoom, you can see things moving inside the camera a little bit, or inside the lens a little bit. It just feels really digital to me. And so as I would zoom in closer to 250 millimeters, it just felt like it wasn't going to capture as good of a photo. That may just be me and the surroundings that I was shooting in. However, it does just feel really digital. It has an f2 fixed aperture. There is no adjustable aperture on this camera. Because of the nature of the camera, it works a lot different than other cameras. So there is no iris on the lens. It's a fixed f2 aperture. And so you're going to need to make your adjustments with the shutter speed and the ISO. It also includes a ND filter that you can put on, which I highly recommend if you're going to be shooting outside in relatively bright daylight, because otherwise this camera just increases the shutter speed all the way up to its fastest, which is 1/5000th of a second, and then you can't get anything else after that. Your ISO is as low as it can go, and your shutter speed is as high as it can go. The only thing you can do is put an ND filter on the front. Thankfully, this camera includes that. Like I said, it does include one battery and a charger, a walled charger that you can plug in. But overall, this is just a fun camera. It's not going to be a camera that you can go and buy to replace you know, a standard DSLR camera or a mirrorless camera or something like that. It's a special effects camera. It's something that you buy because you want to stretch your creativity. You want to try something new. And that's exactly why I wanted to give it a try. Other small features, it does have a hot shoe on the top. You can buy a flash for it. I've seen there's an external flash you can get for it, and then I've also seen people trigger strobes with this and actually do a photography shoot with this camera, which was pretty neat. So little features, you know, it just typically has of cameras, standard cameras. This lens hood pops off. It is a little flimsy as it doesn't hold on as nicely as other lens hoods, and sometimes it's kind of a pain to get onto the camera. But nonetheless, I think it's very much needed. There were instances in brighter scenarios where I would get like a little bit of a dark line along the left-hand side. And the only way I was able to combat that was to kind of rotate this a little bit. I think it had to do with shading the lens a little bit. So there's a little bit that you're going to have to do. I would not recommend this camera for a beginner photographer. I feel that you would need a decent understanding of at least the operation of a photography camera, or have a video background and understand cameras from that aspect as well. However, as you can see from some of the little short animations that I've posted, they've been really cool. One last thing is the software that you download for this camera. There's desktop software, and then there's also an app that you can get for your iPhone or your iPad. Now, the app for the iPhone and iPad are simply just for getting the photo off the camera, importing it into the device, and then sharing it. There isn't really much that you can do from within the smartphone app. From the desktop app, it has similar features to a stripped-down version of Adobe Lightroom, where you can change exposure, brightness and darkness values on the photo, including black and white conversion and just different things like that really kind of help you tune in the photo a little bit. Those are really nice features to have, excellent features to have, and they saved a couple of my photos that I took that just the subject in the photo didn't end up bright enough. However, when you go in and you create your animation, saving that out to an actual video, like a video that you can import into another video project, is a very time-consuming task. It takes forever for that to export, and the quality just isn't quite there. What I've been showing you is the quality that I was able to get out of exporting that video using the movie export feature in the application. However, I feel like you'd actually get better results if you were just to use a screen recorder and screen record the window and create a video that way. Hopefully in future versions of the software, they'll be able to streamline that process, because for me, I don't necessarily care about saving these out as photos or animations and being able to share them through the LYTRO website community. Like, that stuff doesn't really intrigue me at all. What intrigues me is being able to use this as like a filmmaking tool or a storytelling tool, where I can export the animations out and import them in and set them up in some sort of a video. You can also see a few others that I posted on my Instagram. I'll link that below this video. And then if you're interested in this camera, it's available right now on Amazon for a really good price, and so I'll link that below the video as well. Thanks so much for checking out this video. If you have any questions about this camera, I'll do my best to answer them in the comment section below this video. Subscribe if you have the opportunity and you want to see more videos like this where I talk about technology, cameras, all that good stuff. And like this video as well. Thanks so much. Take care.